When billionaire Theodore Grant checked his phone 18 hours after giving his black card to a homeless mother, his hands began to shake. The transaction list was long, very long, but it wasn't what he expected. Not designer bags, not luxury hotels, not plasma screen TVs. What she'd bought made his carefully constructed worldview crumble. And when he saw the final purchase at 11:47 p.m., he did something he hadn't done since his own mother died. He wept. Theodore Grant was 41 years old and worth $3.2 billion. He'd built his empire on an algorithm that predicted consumer behavior with 97% accuracy. His entire fortune rested on one cynical truth he'd proven thousands of times over. People are predictable. Given resources, they'll always choose selfishness. His late father had drilled that lesson into him since childhood, speaking it like gospel at the dinner table in their Connecticut estate. The poor stay poor because they make poor choices, son. Desperation doesn't build character. It reveals the rot underneath. Theodore had spent 20 years proving that theory correct, watching people through data streams and spending patterns, building profiles of human greed disguised as necessity. But that cold December morning in a Manhattan subway station, something unfamiliar stirred in his chest. Curiosity, maybe, or doubt. He'd been rushing to a board meeting, his $8,000 coat wrapped tight against winter wind, when he saw them. Claire Bennett, 29 years old, though she looked older from exhaustion carved deep into every line of her face, sat against the cold tile wall near the downtown platform. Her daughter, Ruby, just 5 years old, slept curled in her lap, wrapped in a donated coat 3 sizes too large. Claire's arms were locked around the child like a fortress made of flesh and bone and desperate mother's love that refused to break even when everything else had. A cardboard sign rested beside them, the words written in black marker with a hand that had clearly been shaking. Single mom, lost everything, anything helps. God bless you. Theodore stopped walking. His assistant nearly collided with him, already protesting about the board waiting, about the merger documents that needed signatures, about the 9 minutes they had before being catastrophically late. But Theodore barely heard her. He was staring at Claire, at the way she held her daughter, at the way her eyes opened when she sensed someone standing too close, the automatic fear of a woman who'd learned the world wasn't safe for people like her. His father's voice echoed in his mind, cold and certain. Give them money and watch them waste it. They always do. But standing there in that subway station with 1,000 people rushing past like this woman and child were invisible, Theodore made a decision that would change everything. He would conduct a social experiment. He would give this woman everything and see what she did with it. Prove his father right once and for all, or discover that 20 years of cynicism had been built on a foundation of lies. Before we continue, if you believe in the power of human goodness to surprise us, subscribe to Love is Kindness for stories that restore faith in humanity. Now tell us, what would you do if given unlimited resources for 24 hours? Comment below and let us know where you're watching from. Theodore knelt down on the filthy subway tile, his expensive pants touching ground that smelled of urine and desperation, and pulled out his wallet. Claire's eyes widened, probably expecting a few dollars if she was lucky, maybe 20 if the universe felt generous that morning. Instead, Theodore extracted a sleek platinum card with raised numbers and no spending limit. The kind of card that opened every door, bought every luxury, granted access to a world Claire hadn't seen in years, if ever. 24 hours, he said, his voice steady despite the absolute insanity of what he was doing. Buy whatever you want, no restrictions, no limits, no questions asked. Claire stared at the card like he'd handed her a loaded weapon. Why would you do this? She whispered, her voice breaking around the edges, arms instinctively tightening around Ruby, as if even kindness might be a trap designed to take her daughter away. Theodore met her eyes and for the first time in 20 years spoke a truth that felt uncomfortably vulnerable. To prove something. To see if desperation makes monsters or reveals character, to test whether my father was right about everything or whether I've spent 2 decades believing a lie that protected my wallet but poisoned my soul. Claire's hands trembled violently as she reached for the card, tears spilling down her cheeks in silent streams that spoke of months, maybe years, of holding everything together with nothing but willpower and a mother's love that refused to surrender. Ruby stirred in her arms, blinking awake with those huge 5-year-old eyes that still believed the world could be good. She looked up at Theodore, processing his expensive coat and polished shoes and the way her mother was crying. "Mama," she asked in that pure, unfiltered voice children have before life teaches them cynicism, "is that man an angel?" Theodore returned to his penthouse overlooking the Hudson River, 47th floor, floor-to-ceiling windows, art worth millions hanging on walls that echoed with expensive emptiness. He opened the app on his phone that tracked every transaction on every card he owned, the same technology that had made him billions by predicting exactly how people would spend money when given the chance. He expected a shopping spree. Designer bags from Fifth Avenue, a luxury hotel suite, plasma screen TVs, jewelry, revenge shopping against a world that had failed her so completely. His father's voice echoed in his skull, cold and certain. "They'll bleed you dry, son. Give the desperate an inch and they'll take everything and still demand more. They can't help themselves." The first notification arrived at 10:37 a.m., $47.32 at Target. Theodore stared at his phone, confused. Target? Not Bergdorf Goodman, not Tiffany's, not some exclusive boutique where a single handbag cost more than most people earned in a month? He checked the itemized receipt. Children's clothes, size 5T, size 6T, a warm winter coat with a hood, snow boots, socks, underwear, everything practical, everything necessary, nothing frivolous, nothing expensive. Just the basics a mother would buy if she could finally afford to keep her child warm. Hour 4 brought an $89 charge at a grocery store. Theodore pulled up the receipt, scanning the items with growing bewilderment. Milk, bread, peanut butter, apples, chicken, rice, vegetables, real food, nutritious food. The kind you'd buy if you were planning meals for a week, not indulging in luxury. No lobster, no caviar, no imported cheeses or expensive wines. Just food that would keep a 5-year-old healthy and fed. Hour 5 and 6 brought pharmacy charges, children's Tylenol, vitamins, first aid supplies, toothbrushes, toothpaste, the mundane necessities that poverty makes impossible. Then, at hour 7, a notification that made Theodore actually stand up from his leather chair and walk to the window, staring out at the city below without really seeing it. $200 donated to Manhattan Homeless Services. A woman who'd been sleeping on subway floors for months, who'd just been handed unlimited wealth for 24 hours, had stopped her shopping to give money to a homeless shelter, to help other people still trapped in the nightmare she'd just temporarily escaped. Hours 8 through 12 brought a $79 motel room charge and $14 at a laundromat. Theodore pictured it. Claire and Ruby, finally sleeping in a real bed with clean sheets and a door that locked from the inside. Washing their clothes in machines that actually worked, not scrubbing them in public bathroom sinks with hand soap. Basic human dignity that Theodore had never once in his entire life had to think about or appreciate or fight for. Hours 13 through 16 brought nothing. No charges, no purchases, no activity. Theodore checked his phone obsessively, wondering if the card had been declined, if something had gone wrong with the system. But the card was active. Claire simply wasn't using it. She was resting, maybe. Sleeping, probably. Or just sitting in that motel room with her daughter, experiencing the profound luxury of safety and warmth and walls that didn't move. Not shopping, not spending, not taking advantage of every possible second. Just being. Then hour 17 arrived, and Theodore's carefully constructed worldview began to crumble like a building whose foundation had been rotting for decades. $156 at a 8T children's bookstore. Then $89 at a toy store. He pulled up the transaction memos and his breath caught in his throat. Ruby's 6th birthday, tomorrow. Buy books she can keep forever. Buy stuffed animals she can hold when scared. Give her one normal birthday like other children get. Theodore sat down slowly, his legs suddenly unable to hold his weight. Claire Bennett had been given unlimited money for 24 hours. She could have bought anything, gone anywhere, escaped her circumstances completely, even temporarily. Instead, she'd spent those hours buying her daughter warm clothes and real food and a safe place to sleep for one night. And then, With whatever time remained, she tried to give Ruby one birthday that felt normal. One birthday where a 5-year-old girl could wake up to wrapped presents and new books and stuffed animals, just like children were supposed to. Just like Theodore had every single birthday of his entire privileged life without ever once appreciating the profound gift of that normalcy. At 11:47 p.m., Theodore's phone lit up one final time. $500 to the Children's Cancer Research Foundation. He clicked on the transaction details, expecting nothing more than a charitable impulse, a way to end the 24 hours with generosity. But the memo line stopped his heart. In memory of Sarah Bennett, Ruby's sister, died age 3 2 years ago. We couldn't save her, but maybe this helped save someone else's child. Theodore's hands began to shake. He pulled up everything he could find about Claire Bennett, information he should have searched for before conducting his cruel experiment disguised as generosity. The news articles were there, buried under 2 years of digital dust. Sarah Bennett, diagnosed with neuroblastoma at 18 months. 18 months of treatments, experimental therapies, surgeries that offered hope and delivered devastation. Claire and her husband, David, both working 3 jobs to cover what insurance wouldn't pay. Then, Sarah died anyway, 3 years old, and the medical bills that couldn't save her destroyed everything that remained. David left 6 months later, shattered by grief he couldn't carry, leaving Claire alone with Ruby and $600,000 in debt she'd never escape. The hospital liens, the collections agencies, the eviction notices, the slow, inevitable slide from middle-class stability into the subway station where Theodore had found them. Claire hadn't lost everything through poor choices or moral failure or the character defects Theodore's father had spent decades describing with such certainty. She'd lost everything trying to save her daughter's life. And when given unlimited money for 24 hours, when handed the power to finally, temporarily, escape the consequences of loving her dying child more than financial stability, Claire had spent those hours giving Ruby a birthday and honoring Sarah's memory by trying to save someone else's 3-year-old from the nightmare that had destroyed their family. Theodore sat in his $12 million penthouse, 47th floor, surrounded by furniture that cost more than most people earned in a year, art on the walls worth enough to save 100 families like Claire's. And for the first time since his mother died when he was 16 years old, he wept. Not the quiet, dignified tears of a man who'd learned to control his emotions in boardrooms and negotiations, but the ugly, broken sobbing of someone whose entire understanding of the world had just shattered like glass hitting concrete. His father had been wrong about everything that mattered. Poverty didn't create moral failure. Desperation didn't reveal rot. Sometimes, desperation revealed the most extraordinary character imaginable, the kind of goodness that survived despite every reason to become bitter, that gave to others even when you had nothing, that honored a dead child by trying to save living ones. The next morning, Theodore returned to the subway station at dawn. Claire was there, sitting in the same spot against the same wall, Ruby still sleeping in her arms, both of them wearing the new warm coats Claire had bought with his card. When she saw him approaching, Claire stood carefully, reaching into her pocket to pull out his platinum card, holding it out like a sacred object she'd been trusted to protect. "Thank you for trusting me," she said quietly, her voice rough from cold but steady with dignity that homelessness hadn't managed to break. Ruby had the best birthday. "We'll never forget your kindness." Theodore stared at the card, then at her. "Keep it," he said. Claire's eyes widened, her hand trembling. "I can't possibly, Mr. Grant. That's insane. I can't. You already showed me what you do with it," Theodore interrupted, his voice cracking around the edges of words that felt too important to speak carelessly. "You proved that goodness exists, that desperation doesn't destroy character in people who have it to begin with, that my entire worldview, everything my father taught me, everything I built my fortune believing was poison. You gave me something worth more than $3.2 billion. You gave me the truth." But Theodore didn't stop there. He'd spent the entire night thinking, planning, realizing that guilt and gratitude weren't enough if they didn't transform into action that lasted longer than a moment of emotional clarity that would fade when comfort returned. "Claire, I'm starting a foundation. I need a director, someone who understands what people actually need, not what data suggests they should want. Someone who knows the difference between charity that humiliates and support that restores dignity. I've spent 20 years studying consumer behavior and building algorithms that predict human selfishness. You understand something I never learned. You understand what it means to be human when everything is taken away and you still choose goodness. Claire stared at him, tears spilling down her cheeks, her voice barely a whisper. Why me? Out of everyone you could hire, everyone with degrees and experience and credentials, why would you choose someone who lost everything? Theodore met her eyes, and in them he saw his mother's eyes, the kindness she'd had before cancer took her, before his father's bitterness had poisoned Theodore's understanding of what it meant to be wealthy and what wealth was actually for. Because you had everything for 24 hours and chose love over greed, he said simply. That's not common, Claire. That's extraordinary. And if I'm going to do this right, I need someone extraordinary. 6 months later, the Bennett Foundation had helped 2,000 families climb out of homelessness, not with handouts that disappeared, but with a kind of structured support that addressed medical debt, job training, child care, housing deposits, the practical barriers that kept good people trapped in circumstances that had nothing to do with their character. Claire ran it with the fierce competence of someone who'd survived hell and refused to let others burn in the same fire. Ruby thrived in first grade, making friends, bringing home artwork, her 6th birthday photo sitting on Claire's desk in their new apartment, the one Theodore had helped them find, the one where Ruby finally had her own bedroom, and Claire could sleep without fear of someone stealing their belongings or worse. Theodore volunteered at the soup kitchen Claire had started, serving food every Thursday evening, learning the names of people his algorithms had reduced to data points, understanding that poverty was not a moral failure, but a circumstance that could happen to anyone who loved someone dying more than they loved financial security. His penthouse felt less empty now, though nothing about it had changed except him. He'd learned what his father never understood, what 20 years of cynicism had hidden behind walls of wealth and assumptions. Wealth isn't what you have, it's what you do when you have it. And sometimes the poorest person in the room is the richest in the ways that actually matter, the ways that survive after the money is gone and only character remains. If this story reminded you that one act of trust can change 2 lives forever, you know what matters. Stories like Claire's happen every day, but most never get the chance Theodore gave her. What would you do if given unlimited money for 24 hours? Would you choose what Claire chose? Comment below, tell us where you're watching from, and rate this story on a scale of 0 to 10. Sometimes knowing what's right and doing what's right are separated by a single choice.